A few weeks ago, I did a Twitter poll asking which programming course I should be teaching next, and the options were Python, JavaScript, and PHP. Quite a few got back to me, quite a few actually voted, which was fantastic, and the winner is Python. And that makes sense because I've recently done a Python for Beginners course, which covered some of the foundations that you need for learning Python programming. And so this future course that I'm going to be developing is an extension from that. Now, the first place was Python, the second place was JavaScript, and then we had PHP. So what am I going to be doing in this Python course? Well, as I've mentioned, this is going to be an extension of the Python for Beginners course, and we're going to be focusing on control structures in Python. What is a control structure? Well, it is a way of controlling the application's flow. Control structures are also sometimes called control flows because it controls the flow of the program. So here we're talking about while loops, we're talking about for loops, we're talking about if statements, we're talking about continues and breaking points. We're talking about all the things that change the flow of the application as it's being processed. So what are the requirements for this course? Well, ideally, I would recommend learning the Python for Beginners course, and I'll link it in the doobly-doo below. If you're coming to this cold, so if you're coming to this as someone who hasn't done any Python programming before, then do check out that beginner's course. And there'll be stuff perhaps that I'll be talking about that I won't be going into any depth with because I've already covered it in that course. So there'll be some sort of syntax things that I'll be doing that I'll just assume that you guys already know because perhaps you've done that course before. However, that is the only sort of requirement really of learning control structures, because a control structure is more about how the application goes through a series of processes. So it's actually teaching you about those processes rather than perhaps the syntax. The syntax is something that I covered in that beginner's course. I mentioned that I've already done tutorials on PHP control structures. So could you just go and check those out and know what they're talking about? Because there's while loops and there's for loops and there's if statements in PHP and in Python and in other programming languages. Control structures are agnostic to the actual programming language. However, it's the implementation of that programming language, of those control structures, that is important. So yes, you could go and check those tutorials out if you wanted to, but that's going to tell you how to do those things in the PHP world, not in the Python world. I'm not too sure how many tutorials there will be in this course. However, there are some fundamental things that we need to cover, such as if statements, while statements, for loops, and the other bits and pieces I've mentioned. So this is the next course that I'm doing. It's on Python control structures, and one tutorial will be released every week on a Tuesday. Now, you'll be able to get the whole thing when it's ready on Patreon and also on the howtocodewell.net website, so do check that out. And also, I'll be putting some updates on Twitter and Instagram and on Facebook. So if you don't follow me yet on those, please do so, because they'll give you some backstage information as well as to things I get up to on a daily basis. And I'll be discussing what applications I'm using as I'm going. Talking about applications and what you need to use in this course though, is there any kind of software that you need to have in order to follow this course? Well, I'm going to be using two types of software. The first is going to be a terminal window, and I use a program called Xterm for that. I'm also going to be using PyCharm. Now, PyCharm, the Community Edition, is from JetBrains. So that is an IDE that allows me to develop Python applications. And I'll be switching between the two in this course. But you can use whatever IDE you want to use. And of course, you can use any kind of shell, any kind of terminal that you want to use. Also, I should say that I'm going to be doing this on a Mac, but you can use Windows if you wanted. If you can use Linux if you wanted as well. Use whatever you feel comfortable with. The syntax, the implementation of these control flows are going to be exactly the same regardless of what software you use. I'm working on it right now, and every week I'll be pushing out one new tutorial in this course, and I'll be doing that every Tuesday. So every Tuesday, expect a tutorial on Python control flows. Now, the way I work is I go through a series of weekends where I'm focusing on a particular course, and then obviously there's the editing process, which takes far longer, and then the uploading process and sort of just writing the whole sort of meta information about the course and so forth. What I usually do is schedule all of these things up and release one tutorial every Tuesday. So every Tuesday you can expect a Python control flow, control structure tutorial. Now, I'm going to have a backlog of all of these things, and I will be pushing them to Patreon. So if you want to access those before anybody else does, do support me on Patreon and you can have access to those tutorials. Eventually, the whole course will make its way to the howtocodewell.net website, and that website houses the other courses that I've got, as well as the courses that I've done for other publication companies with discount codes for those as well. There's also a shop where you can buy programming books that relate to the courses that I am teaching. So if you want further knowledge, further reading, then do check out those books. The best way to be notified of when these tutorials are available is to follow me here on YouTube. So subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also, do follow me on Twitter and on Instagram. If they're not your thing, do check out the Facebook page as well, because I'll be posting there too. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the first part in the How to Code Well Python Control Structures course. The first thing we're going to do today is look at the while loop. Now, the while loop is a control structure because it changes the flow of the program. And the while loop will be a loop that loops over a particular condition. So what we're going to do is we're going to create two variables, and then we're going to equate those, and the while loop will run whether that condition is true. So we're going to have x, and we're going to equal that to be 10. We're also going to have y, and we're going to equal that to be 20. The next thing we're going to do is start our while loop on line 4. And we have that starting with the keyword of while. And notice that my IDE has changed that keyword to be orange because it knows that this is the beginning of a control structure. Now, the control structure requires a condition. It's going to check if that condition returns true. And if that is the case, then the while loop will be executed. So we're going to be checking if x is less than y, because at the moment x is 10 and y is 20. So we're going to have x is less than y. As always, we're going to have a colon to denote that that is the end of that statement, and we're going now into the body of the while loop. And what we're going to do here is simply just have a print statement, and we're going to be printing out x is less than y. So print, and then in the parentheses of print, we have the string x is, and what we're going to do is concat the value of x, and x is an integer. And what we need to do is change that into a string. So to do that, we must cast that to a string or str. And we put in x like so. Once we've done that, we can press enter to have another line. Just remove some of that blank space here, and that is our while loop. So as an overview, we have two variables, x and y. They're both integers. X is set to 10 and y is set to 20. We have our while loop on line 4. That is checking the condition of x is less than y. So in this case, x would be 10 and y would be 20, and therefore this would be true. If that is true, we are printing out this statement. So x is, and then the string representation of x. To test this out, I'm going to go into the terminal here, and we're just going to type Python, and we're just going to have tutorial1.py. We're going to run that, and as you can see, this is just constantly printing out x is 10. If we just do Control-C to break that out, we have a keyboard interrupt here. Notice that this is a forever loop. This loop will loop around for infinity because this statement will always be true. This loop will iterate over this statement. Each time it will check whether or not this is true, and if it is true, then this will be printed out. And it will always be true because the values of x and y never change. We can literally simplify this by removing the variables and just setting this to be true. Let's just remove this and change that to be this will always run. Just remove that white space like so. Now let's save that, go down here and run that command again. We have this will always run. Let's just clear this down to make a little bit of room, and then at the top we're just going to have Control-Z and put everything back to how it was. So that is how we can create our while loop. In the next tutorial, I'll be progressing this into how we can actually change the internals of the while loop and manipulate this condition. Please do subscribe to pick that up and all the other tutorials within this series. We're going to be focusing on different types of control structures. It isn't just while loops. There's going to be for loops as well and other things like that coming soon. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part of this Python control structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in this tutorial we're going to be extending what we did in the last tutorial where we created an infinite loop. And an infinite loop basically checks whether this condition is true. This is exactly where we left off in the previous tutorial. Today, though, what we're going to do is manipulate these values during the iteration of this while loop. And therefore, we're going to change this condition, the condition being x is less than y. To manipulate this condition where we're saying x is less than y, we can do that from within the body of this while loop. So, for example, every time we iterate over this condition, we can also be incrementing the value of x by 1 each time. And notice this is saying x is less than y. Well, if we're incrementing this value, at some point, x will no longer be less than y. So let's go ahead and do that. The first thing we need to do is create another line within the body of this while loop. Next, what we need to do is have x plus equals 1. And what we're doing here is we're incrementing x by 1 each time. Now, this might look a little bit peculiar, especially if you come from other programming languages, but in Python, this is how we can increment an integer. So an integer being a whole number, we've got this set to be 10 at the start. What we're doing here is we're checking whether x is less than y, and then we're saying x plus 1. So we're saying x, which is 10, plus 1 is 11. Every time we iterate over this while loop, we're incrementing the value of x by 1 each time. So this will be 10, that will then be 11. That will be 11, that will then be 12. That will be 12, that will then be 13, and so on and so forth. So let's go ahead and run this in the terminal and see exactly what is going on. So down here, let's type Python and then the tutorial, which is tutorial 2. Press enter, and we've got x is 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, and then 20. Notice that we've stopped at x is 20. And this is because this condition is no longer true once it gets to 20. So x is less than y. Remember, y is set to 20. Every time we iterate over this condition, we are incrementing the value of x, and therefore there will become a time when x is not less than y. In this case, x is equal to y, so this condition is not true. This condition, therefore, is returning false, which means that this while loop no longer runs. There may be times within a while loop that you wish to skip over certain values. So for example, in this case, we may wish to skip over the value of 15. However, we might want to continue and still have 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20, but just skip over 15. Well, this is something that I'm going to be demonstrating in the next tutorial. So please make sure you subscribe to pick up that tutorial that will be coming in the following weeks. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the third tutorial in this Python control structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in this tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating how we can skip over certain values or certain conditions within this while loop. So previously we had this while loop that also incremented the value of x every time we looped over this condition, so x is less than y. Eventually, this means that x will become the same as y, and therefore this condition would return false, which means that this while loop will no longer process. This is why we've stopped here at 20. Side note, if you're looking for a tutorial on how to create infinite loops, then do check out the first tutorial within this course. In today's tutorial, however, we're going to be skipping over the value of 15. So if x has the value of 15, we're going to be skipping over this print statement. However, we still want to process the values of 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. And of course, we want to process 11, 12, 13, and 14, but we simply want to skip value 15. So to do this, we need to have another control structure within this while loop, and this is an if statement. Now, I'm going to be talking about if statements in more detail later on in this course, but today what we're doing is we're just simply checking the condition of x, if x is equal to the value of 15. And if that is the case, we wish to skip over this process. So to do this, we have another line straight under the while statement, and we're going to have if x equals 15, and then we're going to have our colon. In the body of this if statement, we need to have another keyword, and that keyword is going to be continue. So let's type continue. Notice that my IDE has changed that to be orange, which means that it is a keyword continue. What we're doing here is we're continuing on to the next iteration of this loop. So if x equals 15, we're going to skip that whole process, which means these two lines, lines 7 and 8, will not run. Now, maybe you can spot a potential flaw in this logic. If 7 won't run here, if line 7 won't run, this means that we won't be incrementing x, which means that x will always be 15. Let's run this and double check the logic. So I'm just going to clear down the screen and then run Python and then tutorial 3. So we've got 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. So we've actually stopped at 15. So we haven't actually achieved what we set out to do. So why has this happened? Why have we stopped when x is set to 15? Well, let's just recap over our logic. We have two integers here. We have x and y. X is 10, y is 20. In our while loop, we have a condition where we're checking if x is less than y. This is going to return true in the first instance because x is 10, y is 20. X therefore is less than y. So x is not 15, and therefore this process won't run. We won't continue on to the next iteration of the loop. So we're down at number 7 here, and what we're doing here is we're incrementing the value of x. So now x is 11, which is correct because when we print out x, like so, we have x is 11. We then move on to the next iteration of this loop. So x here is 11. This is still less than y, which means that this is true. X is 11, it's not 15, which means that we don't continue on to the next iteration without processing the rest of this while body. And because we're not continuing on to the next iteration of this loop straight away, we can now increment x again. So this is now set to 12, which is what we have here. Now this continues and continues until we increment this to 15. And once we've incremented it to 15, this condition is now true. So if x, which is 15, equals 15, what we're doing is we're continuing, which means that we're skipping on to the next iteration, which means that we'll never get to line 7, and therefore x will never be set greater than 15, so it'll never be 16. Because this statement here, the if statement, if x, which is set to 15, equals 15, then we continue. Continue means that we skip to the next iteration of this loop. Well, this is always going to be true because at this point, x will always be 15. Remember, when we're continuing, we're not processing the stuff underneath the continue statement within this current iteration. So x will never be incremented past 15. Now, this is a good example of the importance of the order in which the program is written in. So we have line 4, which is the while statement. Line 5 is the if statement to check whether it's 15. Line 6 is the continue statement. So if it is 15, we continue on to the next iteration. On line 7, we're actually incrementing it, and on line 8, we print out this statement to the screen. So what we can do to fix this is move line 7 all the way up to line 5. Let's just bring that down like so. So now what we've done is we're incrementing x by 1 regardless of the value of x. So just to recap, this is the condition, x less than y. We then increment x, so that will be 11, 12, 13, 14, so on and so forth. If x is 15, we then continue, or we skip to the next iteration of this loop. So the next check, to check whether x is less than y. Remember, we have incremented x regardless of this statement. Let's run this and see what happens. Let's just save that. I'm going to clear down the screen just to make some room. Run Python tutorial 3. So now we have 11, 12, 13, 14, and then we go straight to 16, 17, 18, 19, and 20. So we have skipped over number 15. So here we're saying that we're incrementing x by 1, but if x is equal to 15, then we continue, which means that we skip this print statement. We skip the rest of the body of the while loop. But we skip it, we don't stop it, and therefore we move on to the next iteration. And because we're incrementing x by 1 each time, this will always change. This condition here will always change. And again, when we get to 20, x will no longer be less than y because x will be 20, y will be 20, x therefore will not be less than 20, and therefore we stop this while loop. Now, there are times in programming where you simply want to quit out of a loop, and that is what we're going to be focusing on in the next tutorial. So please do subscribe to pick that up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the fourth part of this Python control structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating how we can quit out of this while loop. So at the moment what we're doing is we're iterating over this condition, if x is less than y. We're incrementing the value of x by 1 each time we run this while loop, and we're checking if x is equal to the value of 15. If that is the case, then we continue on to the next iteration without processing this print statement. But what happens if we want to completely come out of this while loop if x reaches a certain value. So let's say, for example, as soon as we get to 18, we want to completely come out of this while loop. To do this, we need to have another if condition. And what we need to do is check if the value of x is equal to 18. If that is the case, we need to come out of this while loop. And to do that, we use the keyword break. So type break like so. And can you notice that the word break has turned orange because that is a keyword. So let's hit save and run this again. So I'm just going to clear down the screen to make some room, and then I'm going to run tutorial 4. So we have 11, 12, 13 and 14 as normal, and then we skip over value 15 and we go straight to 16 and then 17. Once we get to 18, we completely come out of this loop. And notice that we're not actually printing out x is 18, and that is because we're breaking on line 9 before we actually print out this statement. So x is, and then the string representation of x, which would be 18. If we wanted to print out 18, we would move the print statement above this condition, like so. Let's just tidy this up, remove those lines. So now we have x incrementing that by 1, checking if it's 15. If that's the case, we continue, we still print, and then we're checking if x is 18, and if that is the case, then we come straight out of the while loop. Let's save this and see what happens. So I'm just going to clear down the screen again, and then I'm going to run the tutorial file once more. So we have 11 all the way down to 18, and of course we've skipped number 15, and we've stopped at 18. Now this break keyword is very handy when you want to come out of the while loop if something in your program has gone horribly wrong. So if you're checking for a condition that shouldn't actually be true, and if it is the case, then you come straight out of the while loop and you stop processing that while loop. Coming up in this course, we're going to be looking at different types of loops in Python. So for example, the for loop. We're also going to be looking at different types of control structures that you can use in your Python application. So do subscribe to pick those up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again next time. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the 5th tutorial in the Python Control Structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in this tutorial we're going to take a look at the for loop. Now in the previous tutorials we were taking a look at the while loop, and the while loop takes a condition. So if that condition is true, so whilst x is less than y, if that is true, then the contents of the while loop is processed. So in this case, if x is less than y, then we go ahead and we run that block within the while loop. However, in the for loop, it's slightly different, because in the for loop, you're not actually checking a condition. You're not checking if something is true. You're actually iterating over a combination of variables. So this could be a list, for instance. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a list. So x is equal to a list. And if you don't know what a list is in Python, then do check out my Python for Beginners course, because I've done a whole segment on lists in that. So x is equal to, and we're going to have a list where we've got A, and then we've got B, like so, and then finally we've got C. So we have 3 items within this list. Now let's go and create a loop that iterates over this list. And as it iterates over each item within this list, we're going to print that out. So we're going to have for, because that is the keyword that we're going to use to create the loop. And the for loop takes a minimum of 2 arguments. So we're going to do for, and then for y in x. Okay, so what does y mean? Well, y is each of the items within x. And each time we iterate over x, y will change to the next value within this list. So that's going to be y for the first time, y for the second time, and y for the third time. So let's go ahead and simply print this out. So let's do print, and then within the parentheses, let's do y is, and then we're going to concat that to just y, like so. Okay, so what we've done here is we've created ourselves a simple list. We've equated that to X, so we've assigned X a list, and then we're iterating over this list, printing out what Y is. We're assigning Y each time we iterate over X. So let's go ahead and run this. I need to just do a CD into the 4 tutorials. And then let's just do Python and then tutorial 1. Let's press that. So we have Y is A, Y is B, and then finally Y is C. So we have iterated over X, assigning Y each time we do so. So Y is A on the first time, B on the second time, and C on the third time. Now, there's a whole lot more we can do with the for loop, and I'm going to be progressing this in the next tutorial. So do subscribe to pick that up. But thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part in the Python control structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in this tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating how we can actually print out the index of each of these items within the list. Now, if you've seen my Python beginners course, you'll know that a list is indexed by numerical sort of keys, or numerical indexes, I should say. So we have A, which is 0, B is 1, and C is 2. If you haven't seen my Python beginners course, then do check that out. I'll put a link in the description below. So we've got 4y in X. This is exactly the same as we had it before. So we're literally just iterating over all the items in X, and we're printing that out to the screen. But what we want to do in this tutorial is actually print out the index of each of these items. Now, to do this, there's a couple of things that we need to change in this for loop. The first thing is that we need to have another variable within this for loop. So where we've got 4y in X, we also need to have 4 key and y in X. So what we do here is we have 4 and then key and then y in X. Now, if you've seen that Python beginners course, you'll know that a list isn't actually keyed by anything. We have an index in our list. When we're talking about dictionaries in Python, we can mention keys, but a key is for a dictionary. We don't actually have any keys in a list as such. What we have is indexes. So this for loop won't actually work because we can't actually get the key from this list. What we need to do instead is enumerate over the values in X. And what's happening when we enumerate over X is we're actually unpacking both the index and its value. Let's go and change Y to be value to make that a little bit more readable. We're just going to change Y in here as well. And of course, we're going to change Y there too. So value like so. So eventually what we're going to have is value is, and then we're going to print out the value. And we're just going to have another string where we're going to have at and index, and the index will be an integer, so we need to have a string, so we're going to cast that to a string, so we're just going to have key like so. Let's change that to index as well, and let's change that to index 2. Right, okay, so if I run this, it's going to fail, and it's going to fail because we can't actually unpack the index from the list because the list is not a dictionary. So what we need to do is enumerate this. But before I do that, I'm just going to show you the error that you get. So let's just save this, run this in the terminal, and we should get hopefully an error. So the error is need more than one value to unpack. That is because we're trying to unpack X being a list. Now, yes, the list does have an index 0, index 1, and index 2. But in order to get that, in order to unpack that and assign that to the index, we need to enumerate over the value of X. So in order to do this, we need to use a inbuilt function in Python, and that function is enumerate. So en and then enumerate. Let's put in X into the parentheses like so and save that. So now we're enumerating over X, which means that we can unpack the values of X, including its index and its value. Let's save this, run this again inside the terminal, Run this, and now we have value is A at index 0, value is B at index 1, and finally value is C at index 2. Now, I mentioned earlier the differences between lists and dictionaries, and certainly I will be adding links to the tuples, lists, and dictionaries tutorial that I've got in my Python beginners course for anybody who wants to learn the differences between the three. And in the next part of this course, we're going to be furthering the for loop even further by using those different types of lists and dictionaries, so do subscribe to pick those up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part in the Python Control Structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating how you can loop over a dictionary using a for loop. Now, previously we looped over a list and we enumerated over that list, which means that we can get the index and the value. Now, in this tutorial, we're going to use a dictionary instead of a list. And if you've seen my Python beginners course, you'll know that a dictionary is keyed by a string, whereas this is a list and this is indexed numerically. So that's 0, 1, and 2. So let's go ahead and remove this and let's change that to a dictionary. So with a dictionary, we have curly braces and we're just going to create the first key. And this key is just going to be name. Its value is going to be Peter and then Fisher. Of course, just use your own name. And then we're going to have a comma and another key. This one is message. And the message we're going to say is hello. Okay, so we've created our dictionary. Once we've created our dictionary, we can now loop over that dictionary, pulling out both the key and its value. So here on line 3, where we're looping over the index, the value within an enumeration of X, this actually won't work because we're not enumerating over X anymore. X is no longer a list, and therefore we have to treat it as a dictionary. So what we need to do is just remove some of this. We don't need to find the index because, in fact, a dictionary doesn't have an index. It has a key. So let's remove that. We're also going to remove this here. And also what I need to do is remove the enumeration. Okay, so for value in, and that's just going to be X, we're just going to set this. So print value is, and then the value. We're just going to remove that. There's no need for that at the moment. Like so. So what we're doing is we're looping through each key within this dictionary. So if I was to run this, let's just save that and then run the file in the terminal. There we go. We have value is message and value is name. But hang on a minute. This is message. This is name. This isn't the actual values. These are the keys. Well, like I said before, we're looping through the keys within this dictionary. So where we've got for value in X, what we need to do is for key in X. Let's change that to be key. Let's change that to be key as well. Let's save that. Run this again, and we should get the correct response. So key is message and key is name. Okay, so that's how you can get the keys from this dictionary. Well, you can do this by printing out the associated value, which is keyed in X. If that didn't make sense, just bear with me because I'll demonstrate that in just a second. Let's go ahead and print out another string. So let's go plus, and then the value is, now we need to do a plus because we're going to concatenate that to the value associated to the key of X. So we have X, and what we're going to do is find the key that we're in, and we're going to print out its value. So we need to have square brackets, and then we're going to put in a key, because that is the key variable. And the key variable in this case is either going to be name or message. And therefore, X and then square bracket key, close square bracket, is going to get the value associated to the key of X. Let's go and save that, and let's go and run this command. Okay, so we have key is message, the value is hello. The key is name, and the value is Peter Fisher. So that's how we can loop over dictionaries in Python. Now, in the next part of this course, we're going to be focusing on if statements. And I know I've dealt with if statements before in this course and also in the Beginner's Python course, but what I'm going to do is go into far more depth about if statements in Python. So do subscribe to pick that up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part in the Python Control Structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in this tutorial I'm going to be demonstrating a very basic if statement. We're then going to be progressing this if statement to make it even more complex as the course goes on. Essentially, an if statement checks if a condition is true, and if it is true, then something happens. So let's go ahead and create some variables and then check against a condition. So like what we had with our while tutorial, which was one of the first tutorials in this course, we had x and we equaled that to something I believe was 10. Now let's do if and then x greater than, say, 20. If x is greater than 20, then something happens. Notice that the if has gone orange. That means that it is a keyword in Python. This is the operator. We are comparing x greater than 20. If x is greater than 20, then something happens in the body of this if block. Now in this case, x is equal to 10, and therefore it won't be greater than 20, and nothing will actually happen. So let's go and change that to be 5. Now in the body of this if statement, let's do print, and then let's have x is greater than 5. Let's just remove that space here and delete that. Okay, so that's a very simple way of creating an if statement. We're checking against a condition. This is the operator. We're checking if x is greater than 5. And if it is greater than 5, then we go ahead and print out this message. Let's just go ahead and save that. What I need to do is just cd into this folder here, so if, and then let's do Python, then tutorial 1. Press enter, and we can see x is greater than 5. Now we've seen this before, so let's go ahead and make this a little bit more complicated. At the moment, we're only checking one condition in this if statement. So we're saying if x is greater than 5, but we can check any number of conditions within this if statement. Let's have y is equal to 20. And then in the statement of this if block, we can have if x is greater than 5 and y is less than 4. Let's hit save and run this. What do you think is going to happen? Well, nothing actually happens. We have a blank output here. Let's just run that again just to prove that we have nothing coming out at all. And the reason why nothing actually prints out is because, yes, x is greater than 5, but y is also greater than 4. Y is not less than 4. So if you think of this if statement as doing two checks, the first check is if x is greater than 5, and the second check is checking if y is less than 4. Now, both of these conditions must be true in order for this to work. So in order to print this out, x must be greater than 5 and y must be less than 4. So in order to get this to work, y needs to be less than 4. So let's go ahead and change that to be 3. Let's save that and run this again. So here we have x is greater than 5, which is correct because y is less than 4. So this statement is running. Now this is checking if both conditions are true on the left and the right hand side of the AND keyword. Now this doesn't have to be an AND, this could be an OR. So let's go ahead and copy this and change some of this around. So if x is greater than 5 or y is greater than, let's say, 15. Let's hit save and then do if x is greater than 5 and y is greater than 15. Excellent. So what do you think is going to be printed out now? Let's just hit save. I'm going to clear down the screen just to make some room and then run this. Now the first output is exactly what we had before. The second output, however, is saying x is greater than 5 and y is greater than 15. However, this needs to be changed to be OR. Let's hit save and then run that again just to get the right output. There we go. Now, because we're using the OR keyword here, it means that either this condition or this condition can return true. So even if that was false, but this was true, this statement would still be running. And this is exactly what's happening because x here is set to 10. So x is greater than 5, that returns true. So that has already met its condition. Or y is greater than 15. Well, y is not greater than 15, y is set to 3. And therefore this returns false. But because we're using the OR, we're saying that if that or if that returns true, then we run this. Just as a recap, let's go and change that to be greater than, change that to be 15. So it's exactly the same as this statement here, but we're using the and I'm just going to grab that and paste that into here. Change that to be an and, like so. And then what we're going to do is just clear down this screen and then run this again. And now we've only got one output, and that output is the OR, this one here, because the AND statement is checking that both sides of this statement are correct. So this is greater than 5 and y is greater than 15. Well, y is not greater than 15. Y is set to 3. So it won't work. However, this will work because we're using an OR keyword. In the next tutorial, I'm going to be demonstrating the if statement in far more detail, so please do subscribe to pick that up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone, and I'll see you again next time. Cheers. Bye. Hello and welcome to the next part of the Python Control Structures course from How to Code Well. My name is Peter Fisher, and in today's tutorial I'm going to be teaching you how to use the else side of the if statement. Now this is exactly where we left off in the previous tutorial. What I'm going to do is just clear this down so we can get some room. So I'm just going to remove the second statement, and also I'm going to clear down the terminal shell as well. Okay, so here we've got x is greater than 5 and y is greater than 15. This won't work, this won't return true because this condition is not correct. Y is not greater than 15 because it's set to 3. I'm just going to remove y from the whole equation. We don't need that at this present second. And what I'm going to do is just remove this as well. So x is greater than 5, that's fine. Let's just bring that to there. Let's save that. So in this case, this is true. This is basically how we started off when we were looking at the if condition. Now, what happens if you want to have something that runs if this isn't true? Well, in that case, you need to have an else. So we can do an else like so. And again, this is going to go orange because it is a keyword. Now, notice the indentation is exactly the same as this indentation here. We start in the same position. So let's go and print x is not greater than 5. Okay, so now we're going to print something out regardless of this outcome. We're either going to print out x is greater than 5 or we're going to print out x is not greater than 5. Let's save this and run this tutorial. So it's Python and then it's tutorial 3. Okay, so x is greater than 5. Let's go and change x. Let's change that to be something like 2. There we go. Let's save that. Run this. Now we have x is not greater than 5. So we're now down in this else section. And like last time, we can also have ands and ors to change the actual conditions. We can also have different operators. At the moment, this operator we're using is the greater than symbol, but we can have equals, we can have less than, and so on and so forth. Now in the next tutorial, I'm going to be furthering the if statement. So do subscribe to pick that up. Thanks ever so much for watching. Happy coding, everyone. I'll see you again soon. Cheers. Bye.